Okay, we are live, Christopher. We're gonna let people matriculate in here for a couple minutes, and we'll get started as if it's a real podcast. Maybe for the people who have joined, all 25, 29, 30, it's going up. What was your favorite part of traveling with me this last few days?
It was definitely this morning when you just walked right by your seat on the plane and kept going for about 5 rows. I needed that hearty chuckle around, what time was that? 9:30, 10 a.m.
Did I look panicked, confused? What happened as I realized my blunder?
Actually, for you looked very calm and like, oh, I just did that. Like I expected more of a panic moment. The young lady behind you was definitely a little confused by what the heck was going on. She's not used to people walking by their seats.
I've been getting 3s and 8s confused a lot the last week or so. I'm not sure why.
Sucks to get old, buddy.
I think it's because 3 is half of 8, not numerically, but symbolically. Like that's what's happening. Yeah, I've been getting a little bit more calm, but in my calmer state, I'm also getting more forgetful. It's like the anxiety has fueled me remembering things, being on top of things, and now that that's being dissipated a little bit, it's leading to more forgetfulness. It's a trade-off, I guess, that we're limited right
I
now.
don't know
How
what
have
to
you
tell you.
how have you recovered from being snubbed at the ACC kickoff yesterday?
I'm fine. I said it on the board and I meant it. Like, yesterday was my last ditch effort of trying to get that question answered, barring some unexpected situation arising in the next few months where the opportunity presents itself. It's time to move on to 24 and ready for football. I don't think he ever wants to answer it. I don't think he'll ever address it. I wanted to ask a question for that reason. Didn't
For
happen.
those who aren't familiar, that was Chris wanting to ask a question at the Commissioner Forum with Jim Phillips, ACC kickoff yesterday, and Chris basically just wanted to ask a little something about his and the league's lack of promotion of the
Politicking.
politicking in the team in their conference. It was Florida State, and this was obviously weeks before FSU filed a lawsuit against the ACC and seemed inevitable. And that seems to be a correlation there. But the ACC was kind of just sitting on idle hands as SEC was politicking extremely aggressively on the same network that the two share to go ahead and get a team in that was less deserving than Florida State on paper. So, anyways,
I, I'd
Chris, wanted to ask
I'd
about
probably be
that.
a little more sassy if we were still at kickoff today, because apparently the new EVP of the CFP addressed the room or spoke today, so that would have probably drummed up the feelings. But it is
Well,
what it is. I mean, no going back in time and fixing what they messed up.
yep. I'm writing about that right now. It is kind of history. It's interesting to see how different players yesterday talked about it. Uh, I'd like to all fit their personalities very well. Darius just Washington is being very uh, calm, insightful, kind of an introvert, was just very kind about it in the way he thought, in the way he captured and talked about it. Uh, Pat Payton just kind of says what's on his mind and isn't necessarily blunt, but just is what he is. And he kind of said, yeah, it sucked, and it still pisses me off sometimes that it's the past. And Josh Farmer being a little bit more blunt of the three said it still pisses me off. So that's going to be a dynamic to
I'm in
follow
the
this
Josh
season.
Farmer camp.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a little Josh Farmer, and then when it comes to this, but it's like, how do you channel that and use it productively? It's the question. So, um, all right, let's get going. 3, 2, 1 for the podcast audio. Thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sonnone. I'm joined by Chris Nee. We are recording this live on our YouTube channel. For those listening to the podcast version, I'll have it up within the next couple hours on Tuesday evening. And Tuesday evening is kind of a holiday, Chris. It's Camp Eve. Happy Camp
Yeah.
Eve.
Yeah, I think this is the earliest start. July 24th will be the official start date of FSU's camp because they play week 0 and they have to travel to Dublin, so it moves it up even further than last time they played week 0.
I would say usually oh, the summer was a slog, and December, through the spring was a slog, and it was quite exhausting to cover and to kind of deal with all the fallout of multiple things, lawsuits, snub, whatnot happening at once. But this summer flew by. I think part of it is this was a short summer because of what you mentioned, Chris. Things start earlier for FSU, but May, June, July have moved pretty swiftly. And I think for me, it's I'm actually really interested and excited and intrigued about what this team's going to be because there's so many variables to it. Are you feeling that way?
Yeah, I'm excited for football to be played again and for us to get back to football. I'm kind of tired of lawsuits and realignment talk and all of that
Sure.
stuff. And truthfully, I don't even really enjoy the recruiting aspect of it a whole heck of a lot anymore either. So I much prefer just to actually watch football practice and then football games and see how it all plays out. I think this team has a high ceiling, but I also think the floor is a little bit lower than we've dealt with in the last year, maybe more on par with what we expected about 2 years ago from a floor standpoint.
Sorry, I was sending a note on the side, real quick. But all right. So before we get going in this episode, and we're going to be doing just a pretty thorough camp preview, is essentially we're going to be looking at position battles, storylines, that kind of stuff. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. First off, Chattanooga Whiskey. They are absolutely crushing it in the craft distillery game. They do an exquisite job with all sorts of bourbon, whiskey, type of beverages, I guess is the word I was looking for. They'll do gin and some other experimental stuff as well, but like bourbon is really home base for them, and they do an amazing job at it. Right now, they have just recently released their bottled and bond for this year. Actually, it comes out twice each year, but so for this one is one that was distilled in 2020. And bottled and bond basically means it has to be at least 4 years old, has to be 100 proof, has to be done in a certain season. There is a high level of like restrictions to it, and that kind of assure a level of quality. And all their stuff is high quality, but bottled and bond sets a pretty high bar. This is only like about $53, I think, maybe even a little bit less than that, but that's MSRP. You can find it in about half a dozen states. You can find it in Florida for sure. Go ahead to Total Wine, some of the local shops too. If you're in bigger cities, like even Tallahassee's going to have it at Market Square Liquor, pretty sure. It's all over the place. And I got a bottle of their bottle and bond from a couple of years ago up here. I've done decent work on it, given how much bourbon I have, but it's going to be in the blue label like that. And it's this specific edition of it was done with like summer kind of notes in mind and more of a crisper type of flavor profile. So give that a shot. Look for it. Chattanooga Whiskey again does an amazing job. Thank you to them for sponsoring us, and thank you guys for so many of you giving it a try. Also, a shout out to the Turner Group. Colin, Amy Turner just work relentlessly to go ahead and make sure their customers are in a fantastic position, whether they're buying or selling a home in the state of Florida. You're in really good hands. They're going to work extremely hard for you. They're well connected. They're able to help you out in a variety of ways. So if you're like considering, do I want to go ahead and buy this house? Do I want to sell my house right now, get on the market? If you don't know where to start, give Colin a shout. He'll be happy to walk you through. It'll be low pressure. If you need to get in contact with him, reach out to me and I'll somehow find a way to make you guys connect. So, all right, that's a shout out to our sponsors as we get going here. Let's get going, Chris. Camp begins tomorrow. A lot of question marks, a lot of unknowns. As we did our ACC ballot, what's the word? What am I looking
Preseason
for?
All ACC team.
There we go. Again,
Order finish and preseason player of the year
these days. We kind of set like an idea of what's on this team, and it kind of gives you a good reflection point. And at the very end of it, you go ahead and you pick who is going to win the conference. I think you had Florida State winning it at first. I think I had them at second. You did. All right. So I had FSU second behind Clemson, but a team that I expect to be in playing in the ACC championship game. So both fairly high expectations. And we'll talk at the end of this about what we think the team will accomplish in 2024. But it's all going to really like materialize around like any high expectations. DJ Uiagalelei, your quarterback transfer from Oregon State, formerly of Clemson, well documented who he is, former 5-star recruit, what he does well, things he doesn't necessarily do well, how FSU can use him, or things that we're going to talk about. And we've delved into this like quite a bit in the past. But I want to get your thoughts, Chris, here on Camp Eve. Like, what are your expectations this season for DJU? What are the things you're looking for from him specifically in the next month or so leading up to the kickoff in Dublin?
I'm very interested to kind of watch how the offense morphs towards DJU and how DJU fits into the offense that they build around him. I think FSU under Coach Norvell and his staff has always done a good job of kind of not being forceful with a quarterback of trying to turn them into something they are not in the offense, more so allowing the offense to fit what they are. You know, we're dealing with a young man who in his career has played in 48 games, 40 starts, 30-10 as a starter. got almost 10,000 yards of offense in his career, about 8,300 through the year with 57 touchdowns, another 1,100 plus on the ground and 21 rushing touchdowns. So he is what I would label a dual threat. I think FSU is going to utilize him as a dual threat. That doesn't mean I think they're going to line him up and run him a ton, but I think there's going to be opportunities where they design runs for him and opportunities where plays where if this isn't there and that isn't there, check one, check two, read one, read two, then go. And I think they will use that. I think, again, much like I did in the spring, I think it's going to be an offense that's predicated on being a good run offense, allowing DJU to get comfortable and then play off of the fact he has a pretty big arm and be vertical with big shots. I think Malik Benson's a huge piece of the puzzle for that very reason, because he's a great vertical threat for you. And I think DJU is a guy that can throw that vertical threat. You got other guys with speed like Jalen Lucas, Shakai Douglas, so on and so forth, who can also be big play receivers. So to me, it's going to be an offense that's kind of predicated on you're going to have to run the ball. You're going to get DJU comfortable. You're going to use both arm and leg. You're going to go vertical with them. I don't think they're going to redefine who and what DJU is. I think they're just simply going to refine who and what he is. I mean, you know, after a kid's played almost 50 college games, what he is. The thing I think FSU's goal with him and the way Mike Norvell talked about at ACC kickoff is to maximize him, to turn him into the best version of who and what he is. It's not about changing what he is or making him into a new player. It's more so this is what he does well on video. This is what he does well in practice. This is what, when we communicate between that he's comfortable with, he likes, he works well in, and then go and make that a pivotal part of the playbook. I think as he plays more games and gets more used to the rhythm and timing of the guys around him, you're able to open it up a little bit more, maybe do different things. I think FSU to be really good this year doesn't solely lean on DJU. Like, it's not a team where he has to win the game for them consistently. It's more so he has to be in position to allow them to win games.
Of all the unknowns surrounding this team, because you lose so much on both sides of the ball, and that means there's going to be either new players from last year's roster stepping in or a bevy of transfers, and FSU uses the transfer portal as well as anyone. But this year's crop of transfers generally have less experience, I think, than last year's, and that creates, again, that variance that I'm going to bring up a lot here with the camp preview. But like with DJ Uiagalelei, like I, to your point, Chris, I feel as good about what you're going to get out of him as I do any transfer. Like, when I'm thinking of what the offense can be, it's like, yes, how is it going to fit around him? And you touched on that too. I think a lot of play action and deep shots, and you want the run game to be really good. You want DJ to be part of that. Like, I think we generally know what he's going to be. And I think that's part of the appeal of why FSU was interested in him. And that appeal is like, yeah, there's flaws, and those are well documented. Some of the accuracy and the passing mechanics aren't great. And FSU is going to try to tweak those to some extent. But like, you know kind of what he is. Clemson in 2022, he threw for 22 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Last year at Oregon State, in a totally different offense, he threw for 21 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Like, I think you have a pretty decent barometer of who he is after his first year as a starter, where he really struggled, seeing him in 2 different schemes. And it's probably reasonable to expect that kind of level of efficiencies and put up crazy numbers. Probably not. Is he going to be super turnover prone and careless with the football and lose you a bunch of games? Probably not that as well. And even he wins about 8 to 10 games as a starter every year. And I know starts aren't a quarterback stat, but there's something to be said of okay, this piece here is the most important of any to the puzzle that you're putting together from a player perspective at quarterback. And he kind of guides you to that level of wins each year. You have a decent idea of what he is. So it's kind of my expectation. I'm not expecting, when camp starts tomorrow, to see this totally newly defined player. I do think him throwing on the run is something that we saw him do a lot in the spring. That was actually pretty impressive. There were a few moments in the spring game where it wasn't as good as you want it to be, but that's an area that he was not very good at Oregon State. And if you want or any point in his career, frankly, the numbers back up, he was not very efficient when on the move. If FSU can clean that up and make that even moderately successful, Chris, I think that changes a lot of his game. And we saw that and changed a lot of what you can do on offense with the play action stuff and moving him around in the pocket, or outside the pocket, I should say. And that's what I'm interested to see if that materializes and continues to be something that he builds on. So it was actually pretty impressive in the spring.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best qualities of Mike Norvell with quarterbacks, and he and Tony Tokars, is that they're very good at working with a guy on things they're uncomfortable with. They're not going to kind of force it upon him, but they are going to try to help them get better and make it a part of their game. The question with DJU is just simply limited time. How much of that can you truly do when you get a young man in January? he'll be exiting the next January, and you've got to kind of fit it in between, and you're trying to win football games. But I agree with you. I think the spring game, I know it wasn't the most impressive performance on his part. I think some of that was putting him in uncomfortable situations to then have the discussion about continuing to work on it. Like, I think that was intentional from the coaching standpoint.
I do too. And that's kind of what Mike Norvell does, is he likes to make players uncomfortable and see how they respond to it, and then you kind of go from there. So that wasn't a big surprise. It's something they did. I don't think the national audience really grasped that, and I know opposing fan bases had fun with it, but like you asked him to do stuff he was uncomfortable with over and over again throughout the course of a scrimmage or not a spring game, a showcase. But we were there at every single practice in the spring, pretty much, outside of 2 scrimmages. And one of those scrimmages, everything we heard was like he went off and he was exquisite. And even without seeing that with my own 2 eyes, like I know what I saw in the rest of those practices, and it was a player who got progressively better at various aspects of running the offense. It was pretty impressive. I thought he was really good in the spring, and FSU did too. Like they thought he was ahead of schedule.
I was going to say, internally, they're confident in what he brings to the table at quarterback.
Yep, agreed. So as we think about, okay, that's your centerpiece on offense. Like going into the spring, there was a chance it was going to be a position battle. It wasn't. DJ, you like really kind of solidified himself pretty quickly. Brock Lang getting dinged up and missing the back part of the spring doesn't obviously help with that, but you're confident. You know who you have. You know who your centerpiece is on offense, who you're building around, what the identity is going to be. As we look at what the rest of the offense is going to potentially look like, and we're viewing it this next month or so, Chris, like what are things that you want to see from the offense, from the supporting cast, that would make you feel confident about what this team is going to do on offense going into the season?
It's 2 things. First and foremost, the ability to run the ball at a high level and run it in a variety of ways, which means being much better at short yardage than they've been in their time that Mike Norvell's been at FSU. I think this offense,
quarterback will help with that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and I think having better guards, guys who are a little bit more physical, and Richie Leonard and potentially either TJ Ferguson or Keandre Jones, more than likely at those 2 spots, I think is a lot of big man, and it will help you. And I think Maurice Smith in the middle is a guy who's been allowed to kind of grow into his body finally in his career. So one would hope the push is better there. I think you got a variety of backs, Toe Philly and Roydell Williams being the top of the charts for those guys, but there's other guys, Keziah Holmes, so on and so forth, that I think can help you there. I think they can be a really, really good running team. And I think for them to be as good as they want to be this year, the identity needs to be a very high level running team. On the flip side, it's a receiver room. It's a constant topic from the spring. It was something, again, discussed by Mike Norvell at ACC kickoff. Very good answer on his part. And it's just guys I think they're comfortable with the amount of talent in the receiver room. I don't think it's where we were, 4 years ago, where guys just couldn't get open because they weren't talented enough to get open. I don't think that's the situation we're dealing with here. The situation we're dealing with here is consistency first and foremost, and then who's going to be the dude when you got to have the dude. When you got to have the play, who's the guy you can dial up. I think they feel confident about Malik Benson and Ja'Kai Douglas being 2 of those type guys. The key is for others to step up, because if you only have 1 or 2 teams are going to focus on them, take them away, and you're not going to have success. Yeah. To me, the guy, and it's tough to say because he's a second-year guy, and you don't ever love to kind of thrust it upon him immediately. But like if Hakeem Williams can take a big step for them, I think it would be huge. I'm not as big of a believer in like a Kentron or Darion Williamson. I feel like we've been waiting. Maybe it happens, and then that would be Swell and Gray. I think both those guys have plenty of talent. It just hasn't happened to this point in their career. To me, it's Hakeem. Like Hakeem's a guy that can be a massive difference maker on that side of the ball. When we get talking about defense, there's a guy that comes to mind immediately for me on that side of the ball too, who's kind of in the same spectrum. Yeah. So to me, those are the things. Like for them to be as good as they want to be, first and foremost, identity, run the ball, be really good at it in a variety of ways, and be able to get the yardage when you got to have the yardage, short yardage situations. And then secondly, when you got to have the passing play, who do you know that's super dependable that you can go to and that it works? And for that point, I think it's very important. 4 weeks coming up before they leave for Dublin. They leave for Dublin. I think somebody was asking, I want to say the Tuesday before the game. I want to say their first practice there is Wednesday. It might be Wednesday, Thursday. I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday. So, I think from now till that point, it's what receiver is going to go out to practice and have consistently good practices, catch it consistently, and just get it done. Like Tron had a good start of the spring, and then he had a miserable finish. Hakeem Williams very up and down in the spring, some really, really good moments. There was just too much of that among that group. Other guys got to step up. What about you, Brendan?
It's wide receivers. Like you need to feel good that you have a second option outside opposite of Malik Benson. And I think we saw enough in the spring with Malik Benson that we feel good that he's going to be like part of the solution. He'll be a plus player for you. Now, can he be like a dominant one? I'm not sure I feel that yet. I know some people within the program think he's going to be excellent this year. We will see. I do like how he fits in with what DJ Ongale does well. He's a 10-6 track guy in the 100-meter. What? What do
Go
you?
long, go fast.
Go long. I couldn't
catch it.
your fingers.
Sorry. But I mean, betting on Benson, buddy.
You are betting on Benson. Like I'm fine. Like I'm comfortable with that. I'd feel a lot more comfortable. If he was your number 2 wide receiver, I think you'd have a potentially elite or potent offense. Like, I think that's where I feel about his game. But as it stands right now, he's probably your number 1. He's going to be your number 1. And so it can someone opposite of him. And you mentioned Ja'Kai Douglas. Yeah, he's going to be your slot wide receiver. You know, he's basically good for like 200 to 300 yards is kind of what he does. You can do some gadgety stuff as well. You know who he is. They're going to supplement the passing game a little bit with the wide receiver, or excuse me, the running backs, Lawrence Toafili, Jalen Lucas. Like those guys are fast, explosive players who have some receiving pedigree like to their name. Jalen has like a little bit of drop issues. LT really doesn't. So they'll have to clean up some of that with Jalen that plagued him the last couple of years at Indiana. But you're going to have those guys to help out. Can that 9 wide receiver in this offense is going to be more your perimeter player, one-on-one winner, usually towards the boundary? Like, can that guy go ahead? I hope I defined it well enough for Dane if he's listening. Can that guy emerge? And it's probably going to be Kentron or Hakeem Williams. To your point, Chris, and Dane's writing a story for tomorrow morning at Knowles 24/7 about the players who need to have really good camps to kind of position themselves to be starters or elevate their play basically to where like if they hit FSU ceiling changes, and Hakeem Williams is that. He probably is the top of the list because you saw flashes of it last year before the ankle sprain got to him and really derailed the majority of his season, and more importantly, like the growth, like what he was starting to put together.
Flashes is what it was, and it needs to become consistent. And
but
that's exactly what Norvell talked about on Monday too.
But I think it was. Let's talk about that real quick. But it was becoming consistent in that window, like the Syracuse game, and then the week against Duke, and the practices that were like it was starting to compound. But what did Mike say? Is it something like it's got to be now, or it has to happen? It's something to where there was some urgency.
I forget the exact terminology, but his consistent point was that guys just need to be more consistent. That there are plenty of capable guys. They love Darian Williamson in the program they have for a long time. We like him a lot. We've talked about a ton in the past. Key for him has been health. Kentron's sort of always been the guy you're waiting on. He's done some really good things, but it just has never been consistent. Hakeem's a young guy that they believe wholeheartedly in, has superstar ability, but can he get there now? It's an accelerated timeline, or at least in some degree, because he's a kid that came out of a high school program that isn't exactly one that prepared him to be a high-level college player off the bat. There was a transition for him in the college game. But it's kind of a now thing. I do think from things we've heard and questions we've asked and responses we've got, that it was conveyed to a guy like Hakeem at the end of spring of like, you have a real opportunity here.
Yeah, it's got to
go take it. Like, go take it. And I think guys understand that. The position we haven't talked at all about here in the offensive discussion is tight end.
Yeah.
It goes as Kyle Morlock goes internally in the program. They like Kyle Morlock. They think he was dependable last year, and they think he'll take another step this year. We shall see.
It is a position of a lot of disconnect of like how we view it versus how the staff does. And part of our job is to relay information, right? And to work on sourcing and try to present accurate information of how the program feels about different aspects of it. And then we have to have our own opinion and analysis too. And like that's one I just find really interesting, Chris, because the way we view it and what we see with obviously incredibly less amount of knowledge and football acumen than the guys getting paid 6 figures to do this job. There is a disconnect there. And I find that fascinating. And that makes Kyle Morlock to me like a guy that I'm actually really interested to pay close attention to in the next month or so, because they have high expectations for him.
And they think Jackson West can help there, and he's been another guy kind of like Darian Williamson, where health's been the biggest hurdle for him throughout his
Yeah.
career, and he is in great shape. He's been healthy consistently. It feels like maybe it's coming together. And then they do really like young guys like Landon Thomas, for example, and then Amari
Mhm.
Williams, who's also here, who will play some DN and tight end, is another guy that they think can help them there. I mean, with Morlock, it's kind of weird. I guess it's defining exactly what you expect from that position. Like, how much do you want a 6'6", 240-pound tight end to give you in the offense? What is it supposed to be? Jaheim Bell is a very different type of tight end, so I don't expect Morlock to be that. But last year from Morlock in 14 games, 11 starts, 19 catches, 255 yards, if I recall correctly, no touchdowns. Obviously, you'd like your tight end to be a red zone threat, just the size matter, that
Mhm.
type of thing. 19,255 is not bad when he was second fiddle to Jaheim Bell, who was definitely going to get force fed more. What's the jump you need to see from there to feel content with the production you're getting from the position? I guess is the real question you need to ask yourself when you're discussing that position.
Even beyond production, just like efficient, like what are you doing with your opportunities? Are you being physical? Are you being a tone setter with the blocking stuff? FSU thought he was an adequate blocker last year. The PFF grade said not. There's a lot of noise in those numbers, however, but like I'd like to see him be more assertive. And like to be fair, this is a converted wide receiver who moved up from the Division II level, and so there's a transition period. It's a fairly complicated offense. All things at the college level, it's a complicated offense more so than probably most. And so like there's a transition period, but like he's your guy. You didn't add anyone in the transfer portal. And part of that is the transfer portal in FSU's estimation wasn't super robust. There's a fun buzzword there I haven't used in a little while at tight end, but like they also had confidence in Kyle Morlock. And so yeah, that's a player who I was going to mention two other ones, Chris. Like that was a player one who I think is a potential game changer for you, who kind of shifts the outlook of the season, how we view the team, depending on what he's able to do, starting in preseason camp and then obviously applying it into the season. The other one for me, you mentioned the guards on the offensive line. Like on one side of them, you're going to have Darius Washington. You know what he's going to be to at least some extent, which is going to be steady, good. Mike Norvell's mentioned him as an All-American type of guy. We will see if that happens. That's awesome. Inside, like death taxes, Maurice Smith starting at center. You know what that's going to
The
be.
boxer.
And like hopefully like the big thing for him is like knock on wood he stays healthy, right? And if he does, like you're going to be solid there. Even if he's a little undersized, there's value to having Maurice there because he's so battle tested and steady.
And the good news at Maurice's position is that if he was to get banged up, you do actually have backup centers on the roster. You brought in Jacob Rizzi from Harvard. He can play the position.
We
Otto
don't
could
know if
slide
Jacob
in there.
Rizzi can snap though. Like that, is it important to you? We don't know that. So he wasn't a center at Harvard, right? He was a tackle.
Right, but he believes he can make the transition. He's pretty comfortable with it. And talking to him a few times about it, yeah, I know. Don't believe it till you actually see it type thing.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But
Well,
I
they
think they
thought
feel
Casey
like the
Robert was
roster
going to be a
can.
center for them last year, and
Yeah.
it's more difficult than it looks. Is what my
Right.
point is trying to be. It is
But
complicated.
I think there are pieces before they get to Darius Washington has to move from tackle to
Yeah,
play center,
I
which
agree.
is the improvement. All right,
I agree.
continue.
But I'm going to the name that, after mentioning a bunch of them, the name that I really want to get to is Jeremiah Byers at right tackle. And I think that's another huge swing player for this team in the season outlook. They view him as probably their best run blocker. He's super athletic. He's willing to be physical. There's a lot to like about him, but like the pass pro stuff has to get better. And that's been something that FSU has been pushing for him for a while. Like it doesn't make sense because he is so athletic and he's smart and he's like there's a lot of things that you watch. He's got a good frame, good length. Like there's a lot of elements to his game that you would say he should be a good pass blocker. It's been inconsistent. This is someone who had to get taken off the field against a good pass rush in Clemson last year. You had to remove him from the game. And then the spring game, like it was, and I think they were trying to push him to do some things technically that maybe he was uncomfortable with in the spring game. There was an element of that, but it has to get better, especially if he's going to be your starting right tackle. If Rob Scott isn't 100% and can't really push for that, and we think Rob's going to at least be healthy. We'll see how he holds up through the course of the season. He'll be healthy going into camp starting tomorrow. But like Jeremiah Byers has NFL potential. Like he has the athleticism and the frame, and I think like the aptitude as well and the mindset to be an NFL player. But like, can he put it together, especially in pass pro? That's another huge one to me, Chris. Like that has to get straightened out. You don't have Jordan Travis back there anymore. Like you need to be really sharp in pass pro.
I agree with you. I think the biggest key for JB beyond taking a massive leap forward is when it does go bad, when you have that horrendous play, that bad play, don't allow it to become something that occurs over and over. It seemed to be an issue last year where when it happened once in a game, it kept happening in the same game.
Mhm.
That's got to go away. That has to die for him without a shadow of doubt. I'm also very intrigued by TJ Ferguson. I think the best version of FSU's O-line has TJ Ferguson in the
I do
mix.
too, because he
I
moves
think
really
he's a
well
big
after.
body who moves great. And if you're
Yeah.
going to be a really good running team, I think he's a guy who's a massive piece to that. He excites me. I mean, he's one of those guys that when I watch him, that's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to be that big, that capable of moving, that good at getting hands on people. They have a nice group of athleticism up there if he's in that mix with the guys that we've kind of talked about. So, yeah, I'm very excited by him. I'm trying to think offensively other than Hakeem and TJ, like position battle type guys or guys that need to elevate and solidify their position in their jobs. Who else on that side of ball is that way for me? I
Yeah.
can't really think of a guy. I mean,
On
a guy
offense,
down the depth chart would be a Landon Thomas. I'd be super excited if
well,
Landon's at least pushing Jackson West and Kyle Morlock
all right,
because
big fella. Hey,
he's
hey,
pretty
hey,
good.
you're jumping ahead there on the position battles. All right, that's
Sorry,
going to
buddy.
be the next
Not so
next.
much position battle. I'm just talking about guys who I think, like, if they're going to be their best version of themselves,
Oh,
them taking a step forward would be great. I do think Landon's one of those guys because I think Landon's probably the most gifted young man in that tight end room.
yeah, on offense.
He's
Yeah,
also a
I'd
hell
say,
of a blocker for a young guy.
yeah, he's someone like there's a lot to your point. Like there's a lot of variance with Landon Thomas. He's a top 100 tight end or prospect nationally at tight end. It's not a position that usually lends itself to playing a ton early. They got him in there in the spring. They've worked really, really hard with Landon to try to get him ready this season. There's a chance he is your third tight end, which in this offense is going to mean 100 or so snaps, right? And if there's any sort of injury, he automatically catapults up the depth chart. Like I think that the potential for him to play hundreds of snaps exists, and that might even be if like things don't go right for him as a true freshman. Now, if things do go right, like there's some people in the program that think that he could be a starting caliber player as early as this year. I think that's ambitious, but that's the kind of talent I think is like capable there for Landon Thomas. So yeah, I'm with you, Chris. I think that's another player of him, Hakeem Williams, Jeremiah Byers, and Kyler Marlock are like four that I'm interested to see what Dane's final list is tomorrow. But like those are four who probably need to be in that. And Terrence Ferguson. Those so I guess five on offense, which is a good amount. That
Five's a great number.
It is, and we do five on defense. And you get a nice 10 number, get a little
there
long
you
form
go.
out of it.
It's all coming together.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk position battles. I guess I jumped
right.
the gun for you jumping the gun. I need to apologize for that.
It's all good.
FSU Clyde.
I love to jump the gun.
On our Knowles 24/7. I know. On our Knowles 24/7 message board, asked for us to talk about some position battles. He wants to know about safety, linebacker, and wide receiver. I think those are the three position battles. Like I'm going to do a position battle sometime this week and do kind of an article outlining what we think it's going to look like, who the contenders are. But I think linebacker, I think safety, I think wide receiver at the 9 wide receiver spot opposite of Benson are the three main ones. Probably guard as well would be the other one I would add.
Yeah.
Right? Is there
to me, guard is can Keandre Jones push TJ Ferguson to take that spot? I feel like Richie Leonard's kind of locked in. Like that's more the battle. I don't think it's so much like even going in. I think it's more can Keandre elevate and take it. And if he doesn't, Keandre's great depth. I do think wide receiver is wholeheartedly a position battle. I think it's very open for the taking. Safety is too, but I think they like both options. And do you want to touch on that? Because that's kind of your guy and my guy. So I'll let you talk about your guy first.
Okay, I do want to address this because I think the message board has taken me saying that Devontae Brown is someone who could help you and that they like him, that there's something there as me advocating totality for him to be the starter. I don't know that he will be the starter. I think the take was better than people thought at the time because it looks like he can help you. But do that mindset of like, if this person maximizes their skill set, that is the best case scenario for Florida State. It is absolutely unequivocally Conrad Hussey being the best version. That's your guy. That's fine. Yes, Chris, you like the NFL caliber, rangy, instinctive, hard-hitting safety.
Always run the ball. Sometimes getting turned around and watching the ball run away once in a while last year, but that's freshman mistakes. Well, I think for Hussey, he's just one of those guys. He's got to take the natural growth pattern.
Is it freshman mistakes? So that's the question. Like, is that because I think it was a little bit.
I think
I
it's
think
an
it was
over
a maturity
aggressive.
thing too.
I think it's an over aggressive athletic player who's allowed his eyes to make a mistake and therefore his
Okay.
body makes a mistake. I think the reason they like Brown is because he came in, he had a good spring, he's an experienced player, and he just kind of understands the college game. I think Hussey's the opposite end of the spectrum. He's still, to a degree, very much learning the college game. Now he got a great deal of experience last year, and that's going to help him. But like, that's the key. Yeah, I'm fine with either of them starting the opening game. My hope is that Hussey goes and takes that job as the year progresses. I think Hussey is a extremely high ceiling football player who, opposite Shaheem Brown at the safety spot, would make him really, really dangerous in that back part of the secondary.
Yeah, because he is, for all the reasons you mentioned. There's so many physical tools, and trying to
Brown's safer, Hussey's higher ceiling.
see. I don't. Yeah. I guess so. We don't. Brown's never played the position before, and that's the
Right.
thing. Is like they're talk about variance. So that's a buzzword
But
for this episode. Like that there's a lot to that position because he
in the
could be really
spring,
good
one of the things they liked about Brown is that he was consistently in the right spot at
at
the right
position. Yeah.
time, doing the right thing, and he knew what he was seeing. He could paint the picture effectively. Hussey's a younger guy. Sometimes the picture isn't perfectly painted. Completely normal for guys. You know, you're going to throw a lot of things at them, and sometimes, well, I've never seen that before. That's why you throw it at them so they can learn it. I think that's where the difference in the two dudes lies, beyond the athleticism factor.
People forget, and I think it's a kind of a, and this is maybe where people think I'm defending Devontae Brown because I am, and maybe it's just my UCF degree talking. Like he was really good at UCF, and people I think are can
Well,
be
22 is that the season he had
he
a
was
strong
good.
year?
He was a 3-season starter. There was one that was in the PFF grades like really high, I think in the 80s, but like he was always solid at UCF. He was like a
And he had a
2.5, 3
setback
year
last
starter,
year.
and he went to Miami and did not perform very well. Now some of that is at the Power 5 level. Was just not a good scheme for him, and that secondary wasn't particularly good. And yeah, I think we could be sometimes prisoners of the moment of what we just most recently saw. And yes, it is the most important data set, right? Is the most recent thing, but it's not the only one. And in the case of Devontae Brown, there's a ton of good film out there and good experience at a high level, like then group of 4 or group of 5 program, where he would play against Power 5 teams and stuff like that. So I think those are your main two. I would say Duke Cooper transferring back from Colorado. It's an interesting story of this offseason. I think he's probably going to play nickel for you most likely, but he also learned safety when he was at Florida State 2 springs ago. And you probably will cross train him and try to do both. So you have some insurance. So you have some insurance policy there as well. The only other name I would mention might be like a dark horse candidate is Ashlyn Barker. They really like him.
You don't think KJ Kirkland?
I like KJ Kirkland's game. I like his athleticism. He feels like someone who's still kind of putting it together. I think Ashlyn Barker's higher floor, and that's what would potentially push him to play. So I think that's someone who was playing like the 4th or 5th series against LSU last year in the season opener. Like that's someone that they trusted to a pretty high extent. He had to make a jump from not playing a ton at junior college level and not being at a great high school program. But now you have a full off season at Florida State. And so anyways, that's one other name that we'll be watching for. You can't dismiss it from the position battle.
So to move to the next position battle, it's linebacker, and it's who's opposite DJ Lundy. Lundy is the guy that is taking one spot. For them to be as good as they want to be, it needs to be Blake Nicholson. And the why is because he's different than anybody else in that room from an athleticism standpoint. If you want a guy who can truly cover sideline to sideline, cover the pass effectively, also give you good acceleration downhill and the ability to finish plays, and is willingly capable of being physical, Blake is your best version of all of those things.
We saw him cover Johnny Wilson downfield in practice last year, like a couple times.
He had a couple really good plays in games of covering people downfield and making plays on the ball. He also had some really good plays of covering guys in space in the sense of pursuit and staying close in the hip pocket. With him, it's just a matter of can he do it as much as you're going to put him out there and how much strain our team's going to try to put on linebacker. Because if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator, I think linebacker is probably what I'm attacking on FSU's defense, just based on the strength of the other units. That's not really knocking that unit. I just think that's the unit you go after. So yeah, it's that. I mean, there's other guys in that room who they expect to help. Justin Cryer, who turned in a very good freshman campaign, got a great deal of experience. I think Justin Cryer is a very high floor guy who helps you a great deal. You're super comfortable with what he is. He's a completely willing participant, very willing tackler. To me, he's like the perfect guy for what they like in that room consistently. There's some Tatum Bethune effect with Justin Cryer, to me at least. And
Yeah, I
then
think that's funny you make that comp, but, like, there's people in the program who think he's Tatum Bethune, but might actually have a little bit more juice and no pun intended, that's a good
nickname
thing,
is
but,
Juice, so it fits.
but might have a little bit more athleticism to his game over the long term with him developing physically
And
here.
Omar Graham's another one that they always make sure to throw into the conversation when we're talking there. He missed a great deal of time due to an injury. He's coming off that injury. They feel confident he's back. We shall see with Omar. But like for that group to be as good as they possibly can be, I think it's Blake taking the accelerated time.
Chris, you're missing probably the name that I think is the most likely.
What, Sean Murphy? Oh, I'm sorry, Cam Riley.
Yeah, not the forgotten man. Not the forgotten man, although you forgot him, I guess.
So Cam Riley's tough. He played, I believe, under 4 different coordinators at Auburn, correct?
At all, yeah.
So
Multiple
multitude of defenses, multitude of variety of using him. I'm very interested because we haven't seen him because he got here recently. How are they going to use him here? What is he going to be here? Are they going to lean into a strength of what he is basically as like a specialty player, or is he going to be more of an every down backer? I'm just interested in that. I don't know. So yeah, that's a good one. Good point.
I think the floor for him is that he is a specialty player. Like FSU doesn't use 3 linebackers a ton, but like I want to stress this. I've talked about it before. They use 3 linebackers more than most teams in college football do. I think they're in like the 90th percentile for that usage. Part of it is like they like DJ Lundy, and he was a good, like they had 3 good ones that they liked last year. But part of it is like the way Adam Fuller's defense is built is like there are elements of that third linebacker spot. Was it the stud linebackers or the stud position? Like it's a hybrid position. And when he first came to Florida State, when he brought from Memphis, like that's supposed to be one of the 3 hybrid spots where that's kind of the space player, the slot, and it was initially going to be a linebacker safety hybrid. Then it turned more into just like a pure safety, and eventually just became a nickel corner. And that was, I think, from a skill set perspective, like where Jarian Jones was playing it last year, and he was outside corner the year before. Whereas the year before was Jamie Robinson, who was more of a safety. It has evolved more and more into a pass-oriented player because of the league that they play in and the amount of 3 wide receiver sets that are utilized in the ACC. Anyways, I say all that because there is a base of using 3 linebackers where you could linebacker that's integrated into the game plan or more so into the installation of the offense. I think that's what Cam Riley's like going to be good at is when you go to 3 linebackers, if let's say the offense wants to go out and put him in space, like in zone coverage, he's not going to kill you out there. He's actually a pretty effective space player. Then if they want to make it a little tighter and you're going against like a run heavy team where they want to put in with like 2 tight ends, 21 personnel, put him off the edge, and he's 6'5", 235 pounds, and there's some nice blitzing juice there too. He can hold up against like down blocking, stuff like that. And so I think he gives you some versatility, and I think they're excited about what he's done in camp. To me, it's like more, can he be that, when you're talking about your basic like 2 linebacker set, can he stand in the middle of the box and sift things out like cleanly and quickly and trust what he sees and be effective? The thing that you praised, Chris, for Justin Cryer, like what he does well as a younger player.
Processes at a high level, sees it well.
Very much so. Very much so. That's why they're excited about him long term. Cam Riley do that. And I think like he, to me, if I had to put money on it going into the season, I think he ends up being your starter at the beginning of the year. But if Blake Nicholson leapfrogs him and outright wins that position early on, that's a really good sign for Florida State. What else? We talked about wide receiver, guard. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be Terrence Ferguson, Richie Leonard, Keandre Jones, maybe Bryson Estes. They do like him. I think he's probably more of a rotational guy at this point that they're going to trust some. But yeah, Richie Leonard can play left guard or right guard. He worked at right guard a lot in the spring. Was left guard at UF last year. Keandre is more of a penciled in right guard, where TJ I think is more of a penciled in left guard. And so you got your swing players. So it'll be just interesting to see which one of that combination they end up liking the most. All right. Sorry, there's a lot of long-winded talking there. We kind of touched on some of these topics, but I would want to go a little bit more into the defense. What are 3 things going into camp that you feel really, it could be a personnel thing, could be just a scheme, could be a total position group. What are 3 things about the defense that you feel good about, Chris, that you hang your hat on and say this is going to be almost assuredly a strength of theirs?
Human movers on the inside of the defensive line with Josh and Daryl. I think they're both going to be very, very good. And I think they're going to give teams some real fits. I think they also have a great history with one another. And there's something about playing off each other at those 2 spots. Earl Little Jr., I'm just super excited for him. FSU loved Earl Little Jr. as a high school prospect. That love had continued into him becoming a portal target. And I think it's only amplified since he arrived at FSU. They absolutely love what he's capable of, what he can do. And I think the third thing for me is, can Marvin Jones Jr. be that dude out of the gate? I think Marvin Jones Jr. is going to be a great football player by the end of his career at FSU. I'm just interested how soon the wheels get moving on that, and he's as good as some people in the program think he can be. When you talk to like Patrick Payton, position mate, about him, Josh Farmer about him, talk to both of those guys that kick off a little bit about him. They rave about him. I mean, the length, the acceleration, the ability to bend.
Pat said that he thinks that Marvin can run a 4.4 40. And I don't think Pat's hyperbolic when it comes to football. I think he's very, very thoughtful and intelligent with football. So I trust that he's seen information or just even understand the context that like that's a possible thing for Marvin. Sorry, it was an interesting tidbit from the other day.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see how that all turns out with Marvin, because if Marvin is high level out of the gate, he goes to Ireland and just wreaks havoc on the Jackets, and good Lord, they're going to be really good. Like, the pass rush is going to be really, really good. The defensive line's capability is going to be really good. The depth of the defensive line, especially at the edge position, is better than it's been here in a long time. And I think interior wise, they got enough. Somebody asked in the thing, who's third most used D tackle behind Josh and Daryl Jackson? Who would you go with, Sonnone? I think Grady Kelly.
I don't think it's gonna be a tier of like last year where it was Fabian Lovett was your clear third and basically a co-starter. I think Daniel Lyons and Grady Kelly are probably gonna play a similar amount of snaps, and maybe even KJ Sampson if he's as ahead of his schedule as we think he might be, and he's gonna be a player who's gonna be fun to watch in camp. Like I think those guys are all getting between 200 to 250 snaps. Like I think that's gonna be kind of it first. I don't think there's a clear-cut third one.
I think the depth this year at that position is more about when those guys need a blow and to just get it back. You have guys you go to. I don't think it's so much last year where it's a rotational thing. Now they're going to rotate them. We're going to have some message board posts on drive 3 of games. Why are those 2 guys in there and not Josh and Daryl? Because that's what they do. They give guys those snaps and build them up throughout the year. But I don't think it's as much of last year where they felt like there just wasn't a whole lot of fall off. As great as Braden Fisk is, and God knows I love Braden Fisk. Like, I think they felt like when they went to Fabian Lovett, like they still had a wrecking ball in there and a great player. There's a step down from Daryl and Josh to the other guys.
Dude, you bring up Braden Fisk. I don't know why that triggered. I just got sad thinking about last year's team when you mentioned Braden Fisk. Like, because he was a player we were so excited to see in preseason camp, and because he was limited in spring. And then we were excited for like our listeners and FSU fans to see him too, because like, oh yeah, that dude's going to be good. And I feel like last camp had a bunch of those moments. That's why I'm excited about this year too. But like all those like unknowns and questions last year were answered definitively, like positively, quite often.
On that topic, guys who like I want to see, like I felt that way about Braden from the get-go. Like 2-3 days after watching Braden practice, you're just like, holy hell, that motor's freakishly unbelievable. And I know it's cliche white guy motor, but he lived up to it.
He did have a motor regardless of skin pigmentation.
I have less guys on this team that I feel that way about, but like Marvin's one of those, because and Marvin's not so much that like I've seen it and I wholeheartedly believe it, but I know he's fully capable of it.
I feel that way about Earl Little Jr. because we didn't get to see him at 100% in the spring. We saw him in the turquoise non-contact jersey in the showcase. He was overcoming I think it was a shoulder deal at Alabama that needed to be cleaned up. And so anyways, that's a guy that they were talking about. Like Adam Fuller gushes about what he was as a high school player. And obviously he's reuniting with his high school coach and Pat Surtain. And like, he's replacing someone who far exceeded all of our expectations. And Jarian Jones is going to be a really important part of your defense. Like I feel that way about about Earl, where I'm excited to see what he can do because I know the threshold of like what they think he can be, but that's a big unknown. So that's mine on defense.
Excited, but not an unknown is AZ Thomas too. I mean, his spring was phenomenal, and Mike Norvell is out there dropping. I think he's a first round capable player, and Mike Norvell doesn't, go
Hey,
into that
you may have
territory
seen
of
a similar type of note in the tea that we were doing throughout the last 2 weeks. They're viewing him very much so as a early round draft pick type of guy.
Norvell's not quick to get like crazy where he's pitting 57 guys in the first round of the NFL draft. So, I think his belief in AZ Thomas is well founded on what the young man has done by putting in work in the system.
Yeah. So the things that I'm like thinking that's one that like I know you're going to be good at is your two outside corners. I think are going to be baseline good.
Yeah.
Right. Like Fentrell Cypress had a really nice spring and was solid last year. It wasn't as good as we were hopeful he was, but he was largely solid. Azaria Thomas, even though he hasn't been a full-time starter, he did play a lot last year and basically a starter. But like, I think one is a potential superstar type of player, and I think the other one is a good to really good college player if he continues what he did in the spring.
Potential all-conference player in Cyprus. Like that's the thing. Like he's not flashy, but he is still a first, second team all-conference type level player.
Yeah. He's
AZ Thomas, is superstar quality. You're right.
Yeah, and so that I feel good. I think you're going to be pretty good, and then going off that, like the next things, I think you're going to be pretty good in passing downs. And most defenses should be good. So I'm talking about like relatively because of those two guys. Because you have Shaheem Brown in the back end, and you would have a good idea like communication and whatnot will be pretty good there. And then because of Marvin Jones Jr. and Pat Payton, like I think you have two badass, like fast, twitchy edge rushers. So if offenses get in third and long, you have the chance to create a lot of havoc. So that's another thing I feel good about. And then
what I feel great about, and this feels really weird to say, special teams.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, 12 months ago, we weren't sure who was going to return the ball.
Right.
18 months ago, we thought they needed a new kicker. Now the kicker is arguably one of the top two in the league and going to be an awards guy. Alex Mastromanno's, the Australian badass when it comes off his foot. And Jalen Lucas is going to be a return man in some fashion and maybe multiple fashions. You just feel really good about that group. Like, it's refreshing. And I think, I voted Jalen Lucas as ACC Specialist of the Year in the preseason. He was really good at it at Indiana, and FSU's got a lot better players in Indiana, a lot more depth of athletes that you can throw out there on special teams. So I just feel like there's a real opportunity for Jalen Lucas to be pretty electric there and for FSU to have their best special teams season as a whole that they have under Mike Norvell.
See, other questions I had, biggest area of concern on D, I think we talked about that. It's linebacker. That's the one where
I think opposing teams, that's what they target. That's what they go after. I think the other thing is depth at corner. Well, I love those top two. After it, there's not a great deal of experience. You probably have to get a little creative with moving some guys around if things were to happen to one or two of them.
Yeah, they've made a calculated
investment in youth.
Yeah. I mean, they really like that second year class of DBs. Quindarius Jones, Kev, fan club president there, Edwin Joseph, who they were really high on last year around this time.
Got banged up.
The camp got banged up. Didn't have the spring they wanted. Kind of had some butting of heads and doghouse type of stuff with him. So like this is
he's on the Jerry and Jones career path though. It worked out really good for JJ. So hopefully it does for Edwin.
It did. Then Jabril Rawls would be the other one there who again, like same class, a little undersized from a frame perspective, but like really sticky, gritty. Like him a lot. So like, there's a lot to like about those guys. But we saw last year, like when Darius Jones got in, like, yeah, there's physical tools, but like something as simple as like turning around to find the football, or we saw it all the time in practice, like very grabby, but like it just didn't have to be either because he was in such a good position. And yeah, there's variance there for sure. Another variance use.
Not a concern, but an interesting thing to me in the preseason, something I'm going to pay attention to is what is Tomiwa? In the spring,
the West Virginia transfer.
Yeah, in the spring they kind of did a little bit inside, did a little bit outside. Did a bit of both. Are they going to continue that trend? Are they going to focus on one spot with him? What do they view him as going into this season?
Anyone that I talked to, or that we as a staff talked to in the offseason, I was almost exclusively discussing him as a defensive tackle. which I think is really, because I think that's what he's going to grow into.
And I think that's where you can help him the most this year.
And I think then, like, with also him being very raw, like he's a younger player at his class. Uh, we saw at West Virginia at times, like, that good is really good, but he'd also get washed out, and just like even just physical stuff, not really knowing how to move and how to trust kind of some of his technique. Beyond even talking about scheme, putting him in one spot, like I got what they were doing in the spring. They're trying to figure it out with what he's going to be. I think ultimately he's going to grow into a defensive tackle. He's 280-ish pounds, but like you see his frame and you see the way his shoulders are, like he's going to just keep getting bigger. Like that's going to happen. He's not going to be able to play defensive end in a 4-man front in the NFL. Like that's not where it's going to be for him. But he's going to be able to potentially play in a 4-man front inside, and I think that's like a good thing to, one, get ahead of the curve there, but then two, like, he is so raw and so green. You want to put him at one spot. That's the point I'm trying to get to. Like, let him learn it. Let him get comfortable with it. Make it a very specific, like, hey, you're probably going to be an interior pass rusher for us this year. That's how we're going to need to use you the most. Let him get really good at one thing, build confidence, and then build it out and grow from there. And so that's I'm interested to see how much growth he's made, because we've heard he's had a really nice offseason. They feel like he's just putting together some pretty basic, like, foundational pieces of his game. And I'm interested to see what it looks like. All right. Oh, we got a group chat. Sorry, I've been in a lot of group chats. That's where the brain's at right now. We kindly left you out of the chat that was occurring, Chris, for the Knowles 24/7 Dynasty that we'll be doing. I know. I didn't think you were probably gonna be bugged by that if we kept going.
I'm good with it. I mean, I'm going to play the heck out of that game just like anybody else. I don't have the time to commit to like a dynasty.
Yeah, I'm curious how that's going to work for me with the season started. I committed to it, but it's going to get dicey real quick. I'll probably be lagging and making us delayed. Anyways, enough talk about that. Which, by the way, real quick though, shout out to the Battle's End. I'm definitely not saying shout out to the Battle's End because I said I would do it if I got App State in this. I'm saying it because it's a great collective, and they do legitimately awesome work. Ingram Smith and everyone else over there does a really good job of promoting FSU, giving good opportunities to FSU players. And, like, in all seriousness, like, before the season starts, take inventory of what you have. And that's a good collective and in alignment with the football program and the athletic department. And that's like an essential part to operating a solid football program right now as a collective. So the Battle's End, legitimately, like, in all seriousness, like, very important part of what FSU has done.
I have one question for you. What player have we not said his name that you're excited to see in practice?
All right, so I'm going to direct people to the Knowles 24/7 message board because we were asked by LFG Knoll 13, one underclassman and then one transfer you're looking forward to seeing. So we'll answer his question. Underclassman.
Transfer for me would be Cam Riley for the reasons you mentioned earlier and what we discussed. Who and what is he going to be for this team?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair one. Transfer I mentioned Little already. I think that's the one, and we've saw him in the spring, but it's going to be a little different here in camp, and he's a projected starter. All right, for someone that I haven't seen, I'm going to go with a freshman here. Actually, there's two, but I'll pick one.
Only pick one.
Elijah Moore.
Damn you.
Okay, Mekhi Danzy.
that's the two. Like, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, Tite and Daniels are here, but they're a lineman. You put them on layaway and you hope they develop. Yeah, for me, it's Elijah Moore. The way some people are talking about Elijah Moore since his arrival is like he's going to be in that receiver discussion we had earlier. I didn't want to put him in that discussion because I've yet to see him at FSU. It's a massive jump.
They haven't seen him in pads yet. Like, it is early. It is early.
But there's a big athletic kid who was very poorly ranked. Why Danzy?
Well, real quick on Moore, the thing that got me excited, I was talking to someone, and because we'd heard good things, and I was trying to figure out like athletic and big, and we saw those things, even like
the hands.
Yeah, but they told he is, like, from a mentality standpoint, goes up and gets the ball, like that's his effort, like that's his football, and like, all right, cool, like that's what gets me excited.
You either got that or you don't usually.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I get excited there. Danzy, like, that's been another guy we've just heard really good things about. That was the first. Mike Norvell, was he asked about the freshman
I asked him about the summer workout program, and
Yeah.
then I asked him how the newcomers had handled being integrated into it.
And Micah Danzy was the first guy that was brought up,
Yeah.
and he's a Tallahassee product, track star, going to be an
Yeah,
all-purpose back for you.
it's not shocking that a high-level track athlete, which is what Danzy is, integrated into workouts really well. Like,
Right,
yeah, to
because
me,
the
like
workouts
that
are a
was
lot
sort
of
of
conditioning
yeah,
stuff right
that's
now.
what he's done a lot of. But they love Danzy. I think they view Danzy wholeheartedly, and not to simplify it, but as a guy who gives them what Lawrence Toafili has with some different tools, but in a similar idea.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's your heir apparent to Lawrence Toafili, but I think there's enough like that you've seen. Well, again, have to see what it looks like with the pads on, but they are allowing themselves to think, "Hey, this might be a guy we get some special packages for, or try to
Kick
figure
returns,
out." Yeah.
kick
Oh,
returns.
I really like Jalen Lucas just being the
But you
guy.
can have two back there.
That's true. That's true. By the way, FSU really fun to play with in college football 25 for like a team that's not like gassed up ranked in the high 80s. Like they're really fun because they have so much speed. And that might be reflective of the roster. If you're trying to say like, is this game accurate depicting something? They got a lot of fun, fast guys you get the ball to in space, and good things happen. All right, last question here, Chris. I got for you, and thank you to people at Notes 24/7 for asking questions last minute. People in the chat for participating. I want this question, and I talked about what we put together for our ACC all conference ballots. And at the very end of that, you get to rank the teams, do order of finish. I just kind of go through who I think the best team's going to be. I think we talked about this earlier. There's three teams kind of at the top that we view as interchangeable: FSU, Clemson, Miami. You went FSU 1. I went Clemson 2 or 1 with FSU 2. But like I think it's all kind of interchangeable. Injury luck and a few developments and things like that will probably play a role. But we view FSU highly. I wanted to articulate this. I want to talk about this real quick because we're going to eventually, before the season, do season preview, like predictions. So, context going into camp so we can talk about what happened over the last month. With this context, like, what do you think this team will accomplish in 2024? What do you think it's capable of?
I
What's
think they are a double-digit win team who is capable of probably 11-1 regular season is probably where I'd cap it.
the higher end?
I don't feel comfortable going undefeated just because they have enough challenging games that dropping one seems more likely than not. Especially with a few things to be determined as we go through the preseason and see them. But this day and age, expanded playoff, 11-1, probably playing for a conference championship. Got a real shot at that. If you're in that, you got a real shot at the playoff. So I think that's their ceiling. Now, floor, there's your word, volatility. Their schedule isn't soft. Notre Dame's a legitimate defense. Miami's got enough talent. We'll see if they figure it out in the sense of everything coming together and what they'll be when FSU and them meet up. I like SMU.
Two of the best teams
over.
on your schedule, if not the two best, are on the road. Not that's difficult, but also might like if you're going to lose your two games, you'd rather have if you're trying to get to 10 more winnable ones at home. So, anyways, that is a thought process.
Yeah. Memphis, SMU, Clemson, all capable teams. Well, Clemson's very, very capable, but Memphis and SMU are definitely capable teams. The type that can sneak up on you. SMU's, I think, their first ACC game. It's on the road. I believe it's a week before Clemson, if I recall correctly. So there's just those elements to it. What I'm getting at is like they need to be a good football team. They need to figure it out pretty fast. I mean, heck, Georgia Tech isn't great, but like they're capable. Haynes King can do some things. So
they have a good quarterback, a good wide receiver, and a good running back.
Like, Haynes is an excellent running back for them. They've got a couple receivers. I think their O-line will be a little bit better with Key being the head coach and being such an O-line guy. And defensively, I think they've taken a step forward. Now, I don't think they're a juggernaut by any stretch, but it's the first game of the season. Weird things sometimes happen in that. Those games over there in Ireland, I think for the most part, outside the Navy games, have always been relatively close, if I recall correctly. It's just one of those things to keep an eye on. Long story short, they can be really good. They also got to be on their A game, and they got to kind of figure things out pretty quickly. The schedule is not one where it ramps up slowly for them. They're not doing the 4 softies out of the gate. They play 2 conference games out of the gate, and neither of them are conference killers, but they're 2 conference games nonetheless. Memphis, which will be an interesting storyline with being Mike's former job, and then SMU, and then into Clemson. Like that's not an easy trek to get going. So like they're gonna have to figure some things out. The preseason is vitally important to them. They need to have a great idea of who and what they are, probably by like August 15th. I mean, Jacksonville's going to be an important trip for them. They go over to Jacksonville for 2 practices again.
7th and the 8th, I
That's
think.
usually a bit of a team unity thing. It's also sort of a, for whatever reason, guys sometimes just click on that trip in the sense of figuring it out, understanding.
Keon Coleman was a great example of that last year. Like that was
Jermaine had an element of that. Trayshawn Ward being a foxhole buddy was defined in Jacksonville. Like there's just things about that trip that it sometimes brings it out of guys.
Yeah, it's moving.
So I'm interested to see how that goes. I think we'll have a much better feel in roughly 22 days from now, who and what FSU football in 2024 is going to be. But I think they're fully capable of being really, really good.
I do too. I think the ceiling is 11 wins. I'm with you, Chris. The floor to me is closer to like 8 or 9. I guess like disaster striking could be 7, but you shouldn't not lose like more than 5 games. That's a pessimistic view. I think 8 to 9 is more likely, with 9 being more likely than 8. But I've also been on the low side the last few years with this too. There are just so many unknowns. I'm a big proponent of when I evaluate, when I scout things, like less imagination, more just like what I see. And so because there's so many questions that we want to get answers to this spring, that's why this is going to be hopefully fun to go back and revisit in a few weeks. That's the prism I'm looking at it at right now. So I think probably 8 or 9 win team, capable though of getting to 9 to 10 wins, maybe even more than that. But with that like 8 to 10 range, capable of vying for a spot in the conference championship. I think that's very likely. But there's these unknowns, and that creates again that window of like 8 wins, could be 9, could it be 10?
Doing opponent previews and also ACC kickoff related items for the conference as a whole, I've come to the conclusion that like there is no juggernaut in the league. I think FSU and Clemson and Miami are clear cut the top tier of the league.
That's the tier, yeah.
Because of talent, ability, different factors for different schools. I think FSU, a huge factor is they're very well coached. I also think they've got a great deal of experience. I think Mike Norvell said they have 77 returning players from last year's roster. Now, not all of those are scholarship players, but there's a degree of like
culturally
that group knows how to get it done because they got it done last year. And I think they did a very good job of filling some holes with transfers once again, which is something they've been outstanding at over the last 3 to 4 cycles. Miami's got a really talented roster. They've also got a super volatile situation because they went out and got really good players, but a lot of them are transfers. I mean, Damian Martinez is Cam Ward. Yeah, I don't want to use the word mercenary, but in the transfer world, that's sort of what they built with that group. They opened with Florida. I think they're better than Florida, but like
that's what
you know what I'm getting at. Sometimes things you have obstacles early on and the response is poor. The response is not always good. So that's something there. And with Clemson, I'm not convinced they're a very good passing team because it feels like they have training wheels on their passing game and they weren't good at it last year. And I don't know what they've done to necessarily improve it. So like that's a huge thing for me. And they don't have Will Shipley anymore. Phil Moffitt is a great running back, but Will Shipley was sort of their guy when they had to bail water out of a boat they knew they could go to. I don't know that they have that. So like what I'm getting at is I think those 3 teams are the 3 best teams in the league. I think all 3 have plenty of questions, things they got to figure out, things they have to kind of show and prove on their own out of the gate for us to know who and what the conference is going to be as a whole. I don't feel there's some great dark horse in the league, even though I love SMU. I'm way over on SMU, I know, probably than what they really are. Ride or die Noel right now is just not agreeing with me because he points out the games they lost last year, which he's right. He's not wrong about that. They did lose to better opponents last year, and they're moving up in the world of who they're playing. I don't view their schedule as killer, and I think their roster has improved over last year. I also think very highly of Brett last year.
We did get like some interesting some data points last year with the teams that moved to the Big 12, like UCF, Houston, to BYU, and all those teams struggled throughout the course of a season, especially struggle in the trenches. SMU lost their 2 best offensive linemen from last year.
Yeah, Logan Pryor is a damn good lineman for them, but they did a very good job in the portal. They're a team that I think Rhett
Lashley does a good job.
Yeah.
We have what's it, Cleo in the chat mentioned
Yeah,
Virginia
VTech.
Tech. That's a dark horse
Very
team.
soft schedule and a
Yeah,
lot of returning dudes that have played a lot of football for them.
they were ascending last year. Yeah, it's an interesting league because there's that middle tier is pretty beefy, like in the sense that there's a lot of like teams that are probably going to vie to win 8 games or so, and I think you're a tier above that. I'm confident. I'm very confident that you're a tier above that. But there's not a whole lot of gimmies on the schedule, and there's unknowns, like you said, for every team at the top. There's just an abundance of unknowns, and again, variance, and there's some volatility to some of these teams too.
Excluding Charleston Southern, who's FSU's easiest game?
Boston College.
I think Duke.
Yeah, Duke's really bad. It's on the road, but it doesn't. Yeah, BC at home, I feel good about. Now that's coming back from Georgia Tech, from Ireland, but
Castellanos is like a gnat. He can really bug the hell out of you.
yeah, that's
I don't
true.
think it happens 2 years in a row to FSU. What happened last year with dealing with him, but to me, he's a difference maker as compared to Duke, who doesn't have a whole lot. Like Jordan Moore's really good on Duke's roster, but Duke's not very good. They lost a ton.
BC's gonna like push to be bowl eligible. I guess Duke probably won't. So yeah, you're right. It's Duke. But again, like so now the team that we're talking about, like BC, Cal, like those are possible bowl teams, and those might be
disappointing we don't get Stanford. I would have loved to welcome that horrendous program to the league.
Yeah, that'd been fun. So anyways, there's a lot of unknowns in the league. There's a lot of unknowns for Florida State, and that's going to make this next month for the access we get, the amount of work and effort we're going to put into try to cover in this team as well as we possibly can. It's going to make it fun. Like there's going to be a lot of information we'll be able to get you guys, a lot of analysis. So I say all that, like I'm actually fascinated. I'm reinvigorated. I'm excited to go ahead and cover what the next month is going to be. Talk to me in 2 weeks. I'll probably be a little bit more tired and sluggish by then, but I'm eager to get out there and see what it is and be around Chris and Dane and when Clay gets here and have Brett and like everyone evaluating it and seeing the game. I think it's something that we do very well as a staff. So I say all that. Thank you everyone for watching, for listening, for your patronage to Knowles 24/7, to our podcast sponsors as well. Thank you everyone. This has been On the Bench. Stick with us throughout preseason camp. We'll have you covered. Bye.